So they contacted me because the New York Times, right, who had done the article, so wanted to know whether I would be willing to help represent them. And so this big thing went around. Everybody's going, "Holy shit! We didn't know anybody had helped him. Who helped him? Who helped him?" And they spent the whole next 2 days trying to figure out who in the world it was that helped me. Then they realized that nobody had helped it. And I remember Larry McKay said, "That little prick." And he said, "Sheehan, that little prick that he sent that note around to everybody on that." So they ended up telling me that I'd be happier elsewhere. And I said, "No, I'm fine. I'm doing NBC stuff and New York Times stuff."
They're like, "No, please get the fuck out."
And so then they actually called me in, and the same guy that had told me that they wanted me to do the A&P case, he called me in and he said, "They've decided to terminate you." I said, "Terminate me?" I said, "Is that like the mafia?" I said, or something like that, you terminate. And I said, "Is that like fired?" And they said, no, we don't fire people at Cahill, but they are terminating you. And it turns out that I was the second person in history to actually be terminated from the Cahill firm.
He said they don't fire people, we terminate people?
It's only the second person they ever terminated. The first one was Alger Hiss.
Oh, like the Alger Hiss.
Like Alger Hiss was the only other guy that they ever terminated from they went through every single memo in the law firm and expunged his name from everything. They didn't do that for me.
He was a Soviet spy, is that what it was?
No, he was accused of being a spy. It was a really big famous thing with Alger Hiss and the pumpkin tapes and all that stuff.
What happened there again?
It was a big trial that he was a very, very progressive Harvard law school graduate, Cahill partner, and was accused of providing information to the Rosenbergs, among others, on the atomic bomb, thinking that it was absolutely unacceptable to have the United States have sole control of the atomic bomb. It's the same kind of thing that Oppenheimer got in trouble for.
Yeah,
that there was that whole group of people, the intellectuals, that thought that this was a horrible moment and that they ought to get rid of all the bombs. The only way to get rid of the atomic bombs was to make sure that everybody had them, so that they could get rid of them mutually. Because the United States would never do it.
Right.
So that was so they ended up telling me that I had to leave, and so I got contacted by F. Lee Bailey. This was June of 1962, in the burglary, the Watergate burglary. 72. Yeah, sorry, 1972. June of 72, June 17th of 72, the burglary took place, and so he reached out to me around the 21st or so of June.
Right after.
Bailey. And asked me to come. He, as far as I was still at the Cahill firm.
So you did all these cases at the Cahill firm. This was not that long a time,
right?
Where you did all these cases.
Yeah,
How many?
2 years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Did you sleep?
I was the only bachelor in 176 trial lawyers.
Oh, there you go.
They viewed it as a sign of instability, actually, But I had all this time. I got to do all that. I did all this other stuff. I still had the highest level of billable hours of any of the entering class.
I believe you.
So I did all those cases. Did cases with we represented the first U.S. military regimental band that they, in the 4th of July of 1971, they marched out on Long Island, and they had drafted what was his name? What was it? Let me think of the guy's name. Courtwright, David Courtwright. David Courtwright was a music scholar that had been was graduating from high school and was offered a full scholarship to the Juilliard School.
Oh yeah.
But then he got drafted to go to Vietnam, and he wrote a letter saying he wasn't going to go, and he was going to go to the Juilliard School, and they said, no, you're going to get arrested if you don't come, but what we'll do is we'll make a deal that if you'll voluntarily sign up, we'll put you in the band. We'll give you an assignment in the band. And so he ends up signing up, and they put him in the 1st U.S. Army Regimental Band at Fort Hamilton, New York, outside of New York City, right? They're the big New York City Regimental Band. And he comes in, of course, he plays every kind of instrument and he knows all the music. So within a matter of a few weeks, he becomes the drum major for the U.S. military band, right, at Fort Hamilton. And they're allowed to live off base. They have apartments. They get music lessons. They don't have to they don't have to do any KP. They don't have to do a reveille in the morning or anything. And so they end up taking out a full-page ad. Well, first thing that's how I got involved. They took out a full-page ad in the New York Times, listing all of their names, ranks, and serial numbers of all the members of the band, because David Courtwright started organizing all the guys in the band to be opposed to the war, right? And so they set up a little coffee shop outside of the base, and they had people come there, and they were handing out literature against the war and the whole 9 yards. And he was pressing it for sure. And they took out a full-page ad in the New York Times with their name, rank, and serial number opposing the war in Vietnam. And so they come back in on they get called in by the Spec 4. This guy Gonzalez calls them in, and they have to stand at attention. And he says, that General Higgins, the commanding general of the 1st U.S. Army, is furious that you guys are taking out this full-page ad, and you're going to have to stand here at attention, and I'm going to have to go meet with him. So they all stand there. He leaves. They go and get tape recorders, right? And they all come back, and they all turn on the tape recorders, and back comes the Spec 4, and he says, I've just gotten back from talking to General Higgins. He's furious. If you guys do anything like this again, they're going to revoke your right to live off base. They're going to revoke your rights not to have to do KP duty. You're going to have to do reveille every morning, blah, blah. He lists all these things that they're going to do to him. So they contacted me because the New York Times, right, who had done the article, so wanted to know whether I would be willing to help represent them. So what I did is I drafted up a complaint under the Federal Civil Rights Act to argue that it was violating their First Amendment rights to be threatening them with all this stuff, right? But I didn't want to file it yet. And then it turns out comes the 4th of July, 1971, and they're marching out on Long Island. And they've got the 1st U.S. Army Regimental Band marching along. They've got all the local 3 television stations there, taking the obligatory footage, and all their wives and fiancés and girlfriends and stuff are marching along next to them with these big signs saying, "Nix on war." Does the fact that we've killed 10,000 people make us great? And they're marching along, and it's all on live television. And the veterans of foreign war see these women marching along next to them, and they break ranks and they attack the women. Start breaking their signs and pushing them down, and it's all on television.
Can't do that.
It's all on television. And so the bottom line is it goes out all across all 3 of the national networks about how these veterans had beaten up these women that were protesting the war. So they show up the next Monday morning or the Tuesday morning after the July holiday, and they know that there's trouble, so they brought their tape recorders with them. And this Spec 4 shows up, and he says, "That's it. Higgins is totally furious. You guys got your rights to live off the camp, off base revoked. They're going to shut down your coffee house. You're going to have to do KP and all that." So that they call me. They call me at the office and they say, I said, "Look, we need to get ready to file this complaint right away because they're going to do something more to you than just this." And so I said to him, "Look, if you guys are on building and grounds and KP duty that you have to do," I said, one of the jobs you're going to have to do is take out all the trash and stuff for the different offices. I said, so find out who are the guys that are going to be assigned to do the office of General Higgins, because General Higgins is going to be sending a letter to somebody at the Pentagon about you guys. And so what they did is they go into his office to clean up the office. They're perfectly legit, right? They got the burn bag there. The burn bag is at that time they would type letters, on the typewriters, and they had the ribbon, and they would type one letter, and they'd take the ribbon off for security, and then they would put it in the burn bag. And so what they did is they went into the burn bag and they pulled out all the different rolls of the typewriter ribbon and held it up to the light and found the letter where General Higgins had sent this letter out to the commanding general at the Pentagon, ordering all of them to be shipped to frontline combat units in Vietnam. They said, but don't send Courtwright. He's got lawyers. That's what it said.
Bad you.
That's what it said, right? and so what they do is they also get a copy of his letterhead out of the drawer where they are, go to the typewriter where it was typed on by his secretary, and retype the entire letter. So they've got the letter verbatim, on letterhead, and they've got it, and so they bring it to us. So we bring a motion in front of who was it? Judge Jack.
Southern District?
In the Eastern District, turns out. Eastern District of New York. Jack Weinstein. Jack Weinstein teaches constitutional law at NYU Law School, right? So we bring the action with him in the Eastern District of New York. We bring out a motion for an immediate injunction to prohibit them from sending them anywhere, right? Because they were going to send them to frontline combat units. Well, it turns out they sent them out the next morning. And so they were already on flight sending them out. So we get in front of Judge Weinstein, and we've filed a complaint and demanded an immediate deposition of General Higgins, right, the commander of the First U.S. Army. So we appear in front of we appear that Monday morning for the deposition. We got the deposition scheduled in the conference room right next to the judge's office, right. And so we show up at 9 a.m. for General Higgins, and Fred Cohen is there, and I'm there. He's there from the law commune, right? And we're all sitting there waiting. 9 o'clock comes, and in walks Major Starr, who is the judge advocate for the First U.S. Army out of Fort Hamilton, right? And he comes in all alone, right? And there's nobody here. And so Freddie Cohen, sets him up and says, okay, Major Starr, what's the story here? Why isn't General Higgins here? And he says, well, General Higgins is a general officer in the United States Army, and he doesn't have to appear except by consent. He's citing the U.S. Military Code of Justice to us.
Is that even,
right?
you can't do that?
No, it doesn't count in the federal court. Anyway, so the bottom line is, Fred says, I don't think so. He says, I think, we've got Judge Weinstein sitting, waiting for us. We thought we might have a problem with this deposition. So we go out into the courtroom, and Jack Weinstein comes out and gets behind the bench and says, and Fred Cohen gets up and says, Your Honor, we've got the emergency deposition scheduled here of General Higgins, and he hasn't shown up this morning, and it's just a Major Starr. I think Major Starr would like to go on the record to explain why General Higgins is not here. So Major Starr gets up and says, Your Honor, General Higgins is a general in the United States Army, and he doesn't have to appear except by consent. Judge Weinstein rises up and stands up and puts his hand behind his ear and says, excuse me? He says, I don't think I heard you clearly. He says, could you state that again for the record? And so Major Starr says, General Higgins is a general officer in the United States Army, and doesn't have to appear except by consent. He says like that. And Judge Weinstein says, Major Starr, I think we got a problem here. I said, I don't think the general appreciates the gravity of the situation here. He says, tell you what, he says, you just give me his phone number, and we're going to wait right here. And I'm going to go explain the situation to him. Okay, and we just wait right here. So we all sit there, and he gets down off the bench. He comes back about 10 minutes later, and he comes out. He says, I've spoken with General Higgins. He says he's stated that he will come and appear for the deposition, but only on one condition, and that there be no one else allowed in the room except Mr. Cohen and Mr. Sheehan, who are the attorneys, and the stenographer. And he said that that's the condition on which he'll appear. He says, what's your position on that? And Fred Cohen says, Your Honor, I'd like to renew my motion that General Higgins be held in immediate criminal contempt of court and sentenced to 6 months at prison in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. He says. And Judge Weinstein turns to Major Starr and says, well, Major Starr, you heard him. I don't think he accepts the condition. He said, I would propose that the general be here, at 1 o'clock.
Why did he only want you guys in there?
He was just mortified at the whole idea of having to appear and have anybody interrogate him, right? And so what we do is we send out to every fucking,
You say whatever you want.
We send out to every blowhair freak that we can get our hands on from the law commune, right, to come to the hearing. So that afternoon at 1 o'clock, we've got like about 50 people in the room, just filled the whole place up. They're standing room only all around the place where the deposition is, right? 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock, he comes in. He comes walking in with Major Starr. He's got his lid under the arm, and he's got this little crew cut haircut. You can see his head shining through it, He's got all of his medals on. He comes in and he sits down at the thing, and Fred Cohen, takes a chair and turns it around and puts it down in front of him and puts his foot up on it and leans over onto him. He says, well, General. He says, can you tell me why you transferred David Courtwright and all these other people, to frontline combat units? And he said, those men were transferred in the normal course of administrative affairs of the United States Army. And Fred says, oh, really? He says, you're under oath and you're saying that was what happened? He said, yes. He says, that's oath and my word as an officer. And then he says, Mr. Sheehan, he says, can you bring that letter to me, please? So I come over and I have the briefcase.
Oh,
and
no.
I flop open the briefcase right where General Hayes can see it. And he can see the letter. And I take it out like this. And he can see it right in front of him on his letterhead, all typed out and stuff like this. And I hand it to Fred. And I turn around and go back. And I close the thing up. And I sit back down. And Fred says, okay, General. He says, I'm going to start reading from this letter here. And just tell me, if there comes a point in time that this refreshes your recollection as to what the real cause of their transfer is, just stop me at any time. So he starts to read the letter, and Higgins is just turning green, turning the color of his uniform. When he's reading the letter, he says, okay. He says, these people were disrupting a unit of the United States military. The United States military, every single unit of the United States military has to remain combat ready at all times. And Fred Cohen says, the band? He says, yes, the band. You never know when you're going to have to fight. He said, you have to be combat ready. And he said, well, he says, let me just explain one thing to me, General Higgins. I said, I take it that the reason you had these people transferred is because of this parade out at Long Island. Is that correct? And he said, no, that was part of it. He says, so you understand that it was the women, their wives and fiancés and stuff of the band members, that it wasn't the men themselves. It didn't say a word or didn't do anything. And he said, yes, but it was their wives and their girlfriends that were doing this. And Fred says, so let me try see if I can understand this. Are you saying that men are responsible for the activities of their wives and girlfriends, sort of like a man would be responsible for his dog if he bit somebody? And he said, yes, that's exactly right. He said, and this woman, one of the black women said, she goes to him like that, and he's kind of mortified. And so Fred says, I think we've got enough now. I think we can go in front of Judge Weinstein and get, and so Judge Weinstein ordered them back. Ordered them.
And they were on the plane already.
They were already on it. First class, next commercial airline out of Saigon. That all of those people would be on that flight to be returned here immediately. And he's commanded them to build a bandstand on the drum field, the marching field.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.